So, my name is Michael Allen. I'm the Director and Architectural Historian at the Preservation Research Office. We're a historic preservation consulting firm based here in Cherokee and Jefferson. So today I really just wanted to show you some interesting buildings that tell some interesting tales of the way buildings change right here on Cherokee Street. I can see these buildings out of my office window, look at them all the time, had some time to think about them, do some research. I think that these seemingly normal buildings really unfold into myriad tales of change, the way buildings evolve over time. At first glance, these buildings look rather common, but when you look deeper, you see a lot of different tales across time. And the buildings' lives, they're not over yet, so who knows where they're going next. So the architectural historian Vincent Scully once wrote that great urban streetscapes are conversations across time. We can see all the different eras, materials, changes in the way we build. But sometimes actually buildings themselves are conversations across time. They've changed so much. And so I picked out a few buildings today that really show how buildings accommodate changes in taste and use. This first building here, this was built as an undertaker's livery stable in 1893. So we have this fairly conventional two-story timber post on the inside, brick wall on the outside type of building. So under new owners, the Ziegenheim brothers, the building changed its face. The face presented to Cherokee Street, decorated in this modern, very speckled sort of gray brick, almost looks like the surface of granite, and then decorated with stock terracotta. Terracotta, this decorative, beautiful decorative clay product, adorns the building at the very top, forming a cornice, accenting every curve and move of the top of that building. Those pieces, though, all came out of a catalog. So what they did here, this is not some high-style fancy design. It was the result of architects choosing these pieces out of a catalog, other architects choosing the exact same pieces to do similar things or maybe even radically different things to other buildings all over the city. So in 1915, this is mass-produced, mass culture, mass building culture. We see it here on the front of this building. We know from these etch marks, this is a surface finish that would not have been available when the building was built in 1893, would not have been available in 1915 when the top part of the building was done. For a point of comparison, another building that was built in 1893 in St. Louis was a great, famous work of architecture known across the country, and that was the Union Trust building downtown at 7th and Olive Streets, designed by the great architect Louis Sullivan. Well, the Union Trust building had an exotic first two floors, round windows, big gargoyle-like figures on the corners, this almost cave-like entrance, all with Sullivan's idiosyncratic terracotta designs, a web of geometry. By 1924, the building owners wanted to change the taste of the first two floors, something more restrained, more conservative, following the more classical orientation of that time. They took off all of Sullivan's details and reclad the base of the building. So what happened to a neighborhood commercial building like this one was also happening to the big important works downtown. Buildings change along with the tastes of their owners. Viewers may be familiar with this building. We visited here a while ago to see Small's Tea and Coffee. But the reason we're here today is to show off what may be South St. Louis's smallest storefront. It's about 8 feet wide. My arm span almost obstructs the entire front of the building. This little addition, though, shows the sort of need and density of the city in the early 20th century. This was built in 1911. This was literally a gangway between the undertaking building and the storefront and residential building next door. This would have just been space to go access the back of the building. 8 feet wide, very utilitarian space. By 1911, Cherokee Street's at its peak of building and activity. The streetcar era is in full swing, and this building, there's a need to build in this space. So the developer here builds this little tiny 30-foot deep, 8-foot wide building to capture every bit of commerce that can pulse through that tiny little piece of land. But in 1911 it looked different. This colorful terracotta, these geometric patterns, perhaps inspired by architect Louis Sullivan. this material would not have been up top. This was added in the 1922 remodeling. Again, 11 years later, capturing business means capturing the public attention. Hey, give them what they want. Give them what's in style. This terracotta, right out of the catalog of a manufacturer, was in style. This was showing that this building was modern, was exciting, it's going to draw your eye in. So that's what's here today. However, this low recessed storefront dates to another era. This tile, a very modern tile at the base. Window, seamless edge, all hallmarks of a modern remodeling in the last probably 20 years. But inside of the building, you can step in and see the sidewall of the building next door. The bare brickwork that would have just been exposed to the elements for about 15 years when this building was built, and this other building was not here at all. So small is an appropriate name perhaps, but for a little tiny building like this little top area packs more architectural punch than many of its bigger peers. So quite a little zippy building, and that little piece at the top, the cartouche reaching up in the sky, waving its hand around, saying, "Notice me, come inside." It's been working since 1922. All right, so in the middle of these three buildings that have changed so much is one that really hasn't changed a whole lot. This building's built around 1892, 2 storefronts at the base, 2 apartments above, space on the 3rd floor. Very common sort of building form for St. Louis. Cast iron storefront, these are iron columns, bearing the weight of that brick wall, and that top part, the roof, is called a mansard, gentle slope, clad in slate. It's been beautifully renovated by Jason Deem. But there are even a few small touches of time here, even before Jason got his hands on the building. The storefront recesses, these are from a mid-century period. We know that from this material here at the base. This is a permastone or durastone-like material. It's concrete, made to look rough-faced like a stone. This is very widely used in the 50s and 60s to decorate buildings. Again, just that little touch of keeping with the times, suggesting maybe the stores inside are modern, or keeping up with what you expect retailers to be selling down here on Cherokee Street in the streetcar and bus era. So these little changes keep the buildings fresh. So when Jason renovated the building, he's left the storefronts almost as is. So there's all these layers present, even on what seems from the 2nd floor up to be something that looks like the 19th century hasn't stopped. But down below, there's a cacophony of other voices from the next century still talking to us. We're at 2613 Cherokee, another building that's changed quite a bit. Here it is on the map, of Sanborn Fire Insurance map, 1909, 2613. Notice a few things. It's labeled with the letter D. That means dwelling. It's a residential building. Up front, it's spaced back about 5 feet from Cherokee Street. In this second, I'll show you what that looks like on the side and why we can tell that this is an add-on. 2613 has changed more than the other buildings on the block. 2613 started out as a 1-story residence. Just a little house built in 1888. And the top floor was added a few years later, so it became a 2-story dwelling. But somewhere along the way, we have building permits from 1919 and 1922 that show it was converted into a commercial building. At the top, this geometric pattern terracotta, right off the shelf again of the manufacturer. This is common material. Wonderful to have, to see this building material from the 1920s and know this was actually right out of a catalog. This is a high quality material that you could get from suppliers in that day and age. You compare that to what's available to builders today off the shelf. It's hard to really stay optimistic about the fate of civilization, isn't it? But you look up above here, it's the same terracotta though that was used to decorate the front elevation of the Smalls Tea and Coffee Shop. And there are 2 permits from 1922, so maybe they were done around the same time. The same family owned the real estate too. So definitely some sort of residence there. But the style sort of takes off from Louis Sullivan. It's got a little early Art Deco kick to it, but it's 1922, so it's ahead of that movement. But it's just moved towards simplicity and geometry, and it completely conceals any trace of this residential life the building has. Or does it? Let's go around the corner. We have brick, and then below, oh, we have a limestone foundation. Most of our houses in South City sit on these. That marks this as a residence. Goes all the way back. See, it lifts the building up. So a commercial storefront from the 20th century would sit right here on the alley line like this building so graciously does. We have this elevated up, telltale sign of a residence. We also can look at the side wall and we see the first floor windows have an arched form. That's more typical of 19th century construction. This building has had several lives, several skins. They're all here, but there's no one right or wrong answer as to what this is. Is it a 19th century house? Is it a 20th century storefront? Hey, it's both. And if you stand on Cherokee Street, you get one of those. Stand on the side, you get all of those. So talk about having multiple personalities. A lot of these storefronts would have been flush across the front early in the 20th century. A lot of that devoted to shop space. But by the mid 20th century, it's very popular to create more display window frontage, these recessed spaces sheltered from the elements, so shoppers could come in and look in the windows and see things that might tempt them inside. So a lot of these recessed storefronts come from that period. I'm not sure what the exact year on this one, but I know this sort of geometric pattern and this terrazzo flooring here, that's the material here. It's sort of a concrete material with a precious stone, usually marble or granite, added to make it shiny, to make it interesting. This geometric pattern here uses offset dark and light pieces. This usually dates from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And so it's one other way these buildings kept changing. So this 1922 front also includes this later addition, this later alteration. So these vernacular buildings, are like vernacular pieces of speech, common language, common buildings. So vernacular buildings really, they accumulate change. They accumulate stories of changing use and changing tastes. This building's a really great example. It's so many things at once. It really shows all these different eras of its lifespan. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful.